welcome and kia ora to the TechTALK community. I feel really honoured to be invited to share some thoughts with you, and really keen to actually be part of the TechTALK community in the future. I really recognise it as a community of learning, and I really look forward to it. I just want to talk a little bit about making work work. And I think I come from I've got a 30-year career history, and I know just from talking to Masoud that the general demographics of the TechTALK community probably are a fair bit younger than I am. So I feel like I've got a little bit of wisdom to share, being a bit of a corporate worker for the last 30 years. Masoud, can we flick the next slide? Great. So my background's all in business comms and change, and I found that I was a pretty typical corporate worker for the first 20 years of my career, working in financial services businesses, pretty much working 7 till 7, usually about 6 days a week. I absolutely love my work. I really thrive on particularly communication and leadership development, and working with organisations around culture. But then I hit that fabulous human experience of I had a family, and all of a sudden work didn't work for me. And I thought, oh, what am I going to do? And this was about 16 years ago. And I've got a son now who's 20 and a daughter who's 13 and a half. And I sort of crossed the Rubicon in the sense that I just found that I couldn't make the juggle work. So I dived out of the corporate box and constraints, and I started my own business grow group. And it was kind of an interesting experience, just a mindset around a lot of the things that I'd taken for granted in terms of where and when I had to work. Starting my own business, I found that I ended up working less time, earning more money, and was able to parent as well. And so when COVID has come along, I've realised that people are getting kind of excited about the hybrid model of working from home. And I suppose I feel I've been doing that really for the last 16 years. So I've given it a good test and learn, and I've definitely learnt some tips and tricks along the way. So can we dive into the next slide? Lovely. So for those of you who maybe not located in this part of the world, I live on Wahiki Island, which is a beautiful little island just in the Hauraki Gulf off the North Island of New Zealand. And I've got a beautiful border collie dog, and so again, I'm taking the experience of working in a hybrid way and from home. And I think COVID has had incredible impacts for all of us, around the world. But it's also had a couple of silver linings, and I think for me in particular, I've used the opportunity in the last couple of years to dive into some study. And I've just finished a master's in technology futures with the Tech Futures Lab. And I'm typically, a lot of the students who do that course are in their kind of mid-40s and 50s. And I think one of the takeouts around future of work and skills is the fact that I reckon we're all going to be working longer. So the old template career where you wrap up work, late 50s, early 60s, I feel I've got a runway, much more to give and offer. And so I'm use that opportunity of COVID to upskill, and got really good exposure around the whole world of emerging disruptive technologies. Masoud, if we can dive into the next slide. So my message today is really simple. As a communicator, I've got lots to share, but I think critically, let's redesign work so it works better for people and our planet. But importantly, we've actually got to get quicker at doing it. And so it's as much about tech as it is about human skills of adapting and evolving quickly, which is going to involve a lot more emphasis on human skills around connection, relationship, listening, creativity. So in fact, a lot of the skills that people would refer to as soft skills, but I see such benefit in bringing together that technology and these what referred to as soft skills. But importantly, I've put in here, I reckon we've got about a decade. So if we can jump to the next slide. So we've got some critical drivers of change, and if COVID has shown us anything, it showed us that we could change on a dime if we had to. But interestingly, with that change, and I was only kind of walking on the beach last night, kind of reflecting to my family just how fatigued we all feel. So there's definitely a human dimension and an ability to digest a certain amount of change, and then we all kind of tune out a little bit. And I suppose in some ways, talking about a low carbon economy and the need for our industries to actually shift within the next decade, it really highlights for me the importance of us shifting to better ways, more progressive ways of working. We jump into the next slide. So there's a futurist, Thomas Frey, who said that we underpredict the time necessary for change to happen and underpredict its impacts. And he gave the example of the driverless car, which we all feel is new technology. But in fact, he reaches back into the 1920s to say, in fact, it's been in development for kind of over 80 or 100 years, and we're actually not there yet. So next slide, please, Masoud. So when you have a look at some of the scale of change that's really going to be required of all industries in the next decade or 2 decades, it's monumental in terms of its scale across every single industry. And I think a key takeout for me, just working with different clients and learning more about technology, is the need to become much more literate in the low carbon economy, how it's measured, what technology we're going to use, how we're going to work together fast to make those changes that we need to make, and do it all in a way that actually preserves and protects the preciousness of being human. So we jump to the next slide. So this is, I'm sure many of you will have seen this prediction in terms of what's going to be required in terms of limiting global warming to 1.5. And if it's to 2 degrees, it stretches out a little further. But already, you know, being an Aussie, I've got family who are suffering at the minute from floods, and we've only had a couple of years back really extreme wildfires. So I think for all of us, we're feeling the urgency like never before. Masoud, next slide. Interestingly, with this sense of rapid and accelerated change and technological change, we all get quite excited about it. But that tends to happen exponentially, more and more faster, whereas human and organisational change tends to happen in a different way. There's more variables that come into play that actually push change rapidly at one moment and then impact us in another way. So, for example, we just right in the middle of a global pandemic, and now we've got really significant conflict in Ukraine. And so focus and energy and finances that might have been directed to low carbon economy transition might end up being redirected to humanitarian aid and support. We jump to the next slide. So interestingly, being a human, I suppose, and being into technology, what always amazes me is the stuff that still actually takes time. And you see those beautiful slides that show you how quickly everything's changed. But in fact, you know, we kind of still need the same amount of sleep, you know, as workers and humans. You know, bringing up a child still takes about 2 decades. We haven't made that any more rapid. And so I think that needs to inform us in the way we actually make change to work and work processes. We jump to the next slide. So interestingly, while we've got amazing technological advancement, working with some of my clients, particularly around organisational culture and leadership and so on, I often notice that we tend to still use quite ancient models in terms of, you know, even basic stuff like the 5-day working week or an 8-hour working day, or the concept of the office, what it looks like, feels like. I know some organisations tend to throw in, you know, a fruit bowl and a bean bag, but it still feels quite constraining. You know, old HR processes like job descriptions and the good old annual performance review just doesn't cut it when we look at the level of accelerated change that technology is going to bring us. Can we jump to the next slide? So my message is all around connection and relationship and listening. The skills of the future need to combine literacy in the low carbon economy, but with increasing the voices who are around the table, getting philosophers, getting theatre artists involved in conversation and ideation with people involved in developing technology will give us a much richer and better outcome and result, and importantly really preserve the precious characteristics of being human and what we value about living on this planet. We'll just jump to the next slide. So what can we actually do now? One of the things I've started to do is just start talking about it. So starting to include, learning about the low carbon economy, starting to get literate in its measurements and how organisations need to change, finding a tribe and then taking some action. So one thing that I've just done and joined up to is Creative HQ, arts government agency based down in Wellington, and I've just connected as a mentor in their Climate Accelerator program, supporting startups and people and organisations trying to address the climate crisis and make a contribution and learn in any way I can. I'm conscious of the time, really happy and looking forward to a great conversation this evening. And I'll hand back over to Colart and Masoud to jump on to the next speaker.